Jake stood in the auction house on Meridian Point Station, watching the holographic display cycle through images of the transport vessel. The ship looked rough, with scratched hull plating and outdated engine assemblies, but the structural integrity report showed green across the board. Most importantly, the starting bid was less than half what he expected. Lot 47, the transport vessel Wandering Star, the auctioneer announced. Former registry with Dalton Freight Company, decommissioned 6 months ago, suitable for cargo operations or salvage. Do I hear 5,000 credits? Jake raised his bitter paddle. Around him, other buyers glanced at the specs and shook their heads. The ship needed too much work for most commercial operators, but Jake had spent 15 years as a cargo hauler pilot, working for companies that squeezed every credit out of their crews while taking most of the profits. He knew ships, knew repairs, and knew this was his chance to finally work for himself. The bidding was brief. 2 other buyers dropped out quickly when Jake kept raising. He won the Wandering Star for 7,000 credits, which left him with just enough money to buy parts and supplies. It would be tight, but he could make it work. 3 hours later, Jake stood in the docking bay staring at his new purchase. Up close, the ship looked even worse than in the hollows. Carbon scoring marked the hull where someone had scraped too close to a plasma vent. One of the cargo bay doors hung slightly crooked, but when he climbed inside and checked the main systems, everything powered up properly. The engines hummed with that steady sound that meant they were built right, even if they needed cleaning. Jake spent the first day checking the cockpit and living quarters. The previous owners had stripped out most of the personal items, but the basic furniture remained. He could live here while making repairs. The second day, he focused on the engine room, making a list of parts he would need to order. On the third day, he entered the cargo bay for a thorough inspection. The bay was massive, designed to haul freight containers across long distances. Empty now, it echoed when Jake walked across the metal floor. He checked the environmental seals, tested the cargo lock mechanisms, and examined the walls for any signs of damage or wear. That was when he noticed something odd. Near the back corner, behind some old cargo straps and unused equipment, the wall panel sat slightly off-center. Jake moved closer and realized someone had removed the panel and put it back incorrectly. He pulled the panel aside and found a small space behind it, barely large enough for 2 people to fit. Inside were blankets, empty food containers, and a crude water filtration system cobbled together from ship parts. Someone had been living here. Jake's hand moved to the tool belt at his waist, fingers brushing the plasma cutter he carried. "Hello," he called out. "I own this ship now. If someone is here, you need to come out." Silence answered him. He moved deeper into the cargo bay, checking other panels. Behind one, he found more evidence of habitation. Behind another, he discovered a small medical kit, mostly empty. Someone had been here recently, maybe was still here. "Listen," Jake said, keeping his voice calm. "I'm not going to hurt anyone, but this is my ship, and I need to know who's aboard." A sound came from the far corner, behind a stack of old cargo containers. A soft whimper quickly stifled. Jake approached slowly, moving the containers aside one by one. Behind the last one, pressed into the corner, he found them. The alien female was tall and thin, with pale green skin and large dark eyes. She wore torn clothes that might have once been a work uniform. In her arms, she clutched a smaller version of herself, a child perhaps 5 or 6 years old in human terms. Both of them had marks on their skin, dark brands that looked like burned symbols. The mother made a keening sound and pulled her child closer, as if expecting Jake to strike them. "Hey, it's okay," Jake said, raising his hands to show he held nothing. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien female said something in a language Jake didn't recognize. Her voice shook with fear. Jake activated his translator, a small device clipped to his collar. Most galactic species used them for trade and communication. The device beeped as it processed the alien language. "Please," the alien said, and now Jake could understand her. "Please don't report us. We will leave, just don't call the authorities." "Who are you?" Jake asked. "My name is, this is my daughter." The alien looked at Jake's face, studying his features. Her eyes widened. "You are human." The way she said it made Jake pause. Fear filled her voice, but also something else. Hope, maybe, or desperation. "Yeah, I'm human. Jake, I just bought this ship. How long have you been hiding here?" 3 weeks, said. "Since before the ship was decommissioned. We hid when the crew left. We thought no one would buy it. We thought we would have more time." Whimpered again and stroked the child's head with a gentle gesture that transcended species. That was when Jake noticed how thin they both looked, how their skin seemed dry and pale. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Didn't answer, she just held her daughter. Jake pulled out his communicator and flinched, clearly expecting him to call security. Instead, he opened a food delivery app and ordered 2 meal packages suitable for herbivorous species. The translator had identified its race as a peaceful people known mostly for art and music. "Food will be here in 20 minutes, Jake said. "Stay hidden until I come back." He started to leave, then stopped. "Are you running from someone?" Nodded slowly. "The collective, we are their property, these marks." She touched the brand on her arm. "These marks say we belong to them." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had heard of the collective, a powerful trade organization that operated across dozens of systems. He had also heard rumors about their labor practices, though nothing concrete. "Property," he repeated. "We are indentured workers. My people made an agreement with the collective years ago, but the agreement is not what they told us it would be. We are not workers. We are slaves." The word hit Jake like a punch. Slavery. In the modern galaxy, with all its laws and councils and treaties, slavery still existed, just hidden behind contracts and agreements and legal words that made it sound acceptable. Looked up at her mother, then at Jake. The child's eyes were huge and frightened. "The food is coming," Jake said again. "We'll talk after you eat." He left them in the cargo bay and went back to his small quarters. His hands shook slightly as he processed what he had just learned. 2 refugees hiding on his ship, branded like cattle, running from a powerful organization that considered them property. The smart thing would be to report them. Turn them over to station security, let the authorities sort it out. He would get a finder's fee, avoid any legal trouble, and go on with his life. Jake looked at his reflection in the metal wall. He thought about the child's frightened eyes, about the mother's desperate plea. He thought about all the stories from Earth's history, about people who looked away when others suffered, who chose safety over doing what was right. When the food arrived, Jake brought it to the cargo bay, and were still hiding behind the containers. He set the packages down where they could reach them. "Eat," he said. "After that you can tell me everything, and then we'll figure out what to do." Stared at him for a long moment. "You would help us, a human would help us." "Yeah," Jake said, "I would." He didn't know it yet, but that simple decision would change everything. Jake watched as and ate their first real meal in what had probably been weeks. The mother tried to eat slowly, with dignity, but hunger won out. She tore into the nutrition bars and vegetable paste with desperate efficiency, pausing only to make sure her daughter ate enough first. When they finished, finally spoke. "Thank you. I do not understand why you help us, but thank you." Jake pulled up a cargo crate and sat down, keeping his distance so they wouldn't feel threatened. "Tell me what happened. Start from the beginning." Wrapped her arms around who had fallen asleep against her mother's chest. The child's face looked peaceful now, the terror finally gone. "My people, we are not warriors. We are artists, farmers, teachers. We want only to live in peace and create beauty." "I've heard of your people," Jake said. "Your sculptures are famous across the galaxy." "Yes, our art is valued, but we ourselves are not." His voice carried bitterness now. 40 years ago, raiders attacked our worlds. Pirates, mercenaries, anyone who wanted easy targets. The government could not protect us. We had no weapons, no military tradition. So when the collective offered protection in exchange for workers, our leaders agreed. Jake listened, already sensing where this story would go. At first it seemed fair, continued. Would work on collective farming stations and industrial facilities. We would earn wages, send money home, and the collective would keep the raiders away. But slowly things changed. The contracts became longer. The wages became smaller. They started branding us, saying it was for identification purposes. They separated families, moved us between facilities without warning. How long have you been with the collective? Jake asked. 12 years. I was 23 when I signed my contract. They told me it would be 5 years of work, then I could return home. But every year they added new debts. Equipment costs, housing fees, transportation charges. The debt never decreased, it only grew. Stirred in her sleep and adjusted her hold, making sure the child stayed comfortable. 3 years ago they took from me. Said she needed proper education, proper training. I saw her only twice after that, brief visits where they watched everything we said. 2 months ago, I learned they planned to transfer her to a facility in another system. I would never see her again. So you ran, Jake said. During a supply transfer, I attacked a guard. I am not strong, but I was desperate. I took and we hid in a cargo container. We moved from ship to ship, hiding in cargo holds, stealing food when we could. Eventually, we ended up here on your vessel before it was decommissioned. Jake ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. These brands, what do they mean? Touched the mark on her arm. This symbol identifies which facility we belong to. This number is our worker designation. The collective uses them to track us, to prove ownership if we are found. Ownership, Jake repeated. The word made him angry. That's illegal. There are galactic laws against slavery. The collective does not call it slavery. They call it indentured labor, contract work, debt servitude. Different words, same reality. And they have agreements with my government. Legal agreements. Official documents that say we volunteered for this. Jake stood up and paced. I need to research this. There has to be something we can do. No, said quickly. Please. If you contact authorities, they will return us to the collective. The collective has power, has influence. Even if you believe us, the law will not. Then what do you want me to do? Looked down at her sleeping daughter. Let us stay hidden until you leave this station. Drop us somewhere far from collective operations, somewhere we can disappear. That is all I ask. Jake wanted to agree to take the easy path, but he knew it wouldn't work. The collective must be looking for you. They'll have people checking ships, watching for escaped workers. I know, but what choice do I have? His voice broke. I cannot go back. I cannot let them take again. Jake left them in the cargo bay and returned to his quarters. He spent the next several hours on his computer, researching everything he could find about the collective and labor agreements. What he found made him sick. The collective operated legally, using contracts and agreements approved by multiple governments. They employed hundreds of thousands of workers from dozens of species. Most were poor, desperate, or from civilizations that lacked the military power to resist. The contracts were dense legal documents full of clauses that essentially trapped workers in permanent debt. There were complaints, of course. Reports of abuse, of families separated, of workers kept far beyond their contract terms. But the collective had lawyers, had political connections, had enough money to make problems disappear. And because the workers had signed contracts, because their governments had approved the agreements, the collective could claim everything was legal. Jake found images of workers on collective facilities. They looked thin and exhausted, their faces empty of hope. He found reports of training centers, where children were raised to be compliant workers. He found statistics showing that less than 1% of workers ever completed their contracts and returned home. He also found bounties. The collective offered rewards for information leading to the recovery of escaped workers. There were images attached to some bounties. Jake's blood ran cold when he saw Zen's faces on the list. The reward was substantial, enough to buy a much better ship than the Wandering Star. Jake stared at those images for a long time. Then he deleted his search history and went to find a secure communication line. Susan Grant answered on the third ring. She was an old friend from Jake's early hauling days, back when they both worked for the same company. She had left that life to become a lawyer specializing in rights. "Jake, it's been years. What do you need?" "Legal advice. Hypothetically, if someone found escaped indentured workers and wanted to help them, what would be the legal way to do it?" Susan's face on the screen grew serious. "Hypothetically, that someone would be in a very dangerous position. Who are we talking about?" "Mother and child. They're branded, Susan, like animals." Susan closed her eyes. "I've heard about the collective's practices with workers. It's disgusting, but it's technically legal under current agreements. There has to be something we can do." "Maybe. The contracts might violate some labor treaties if we can prove coercion or fraud. But Jake, the collective has more lawyers than you have credits. They will fight any challenge, and they have the resources to win. So we just give up. Let them take a mother and child back into slavery." "I didn't say that. I said it will be hard. If you're serious about this, you need to get them somewhere safe first, somewhere the collective doesn't have easy reach. Then we can work on building a legal case." "Where?" "Haven's Rest. It's an independent station, not aligned with any major power. The administrator there is human guy named Martinez. He doesn't like the collective much. If you can get there, you might have a chance." Jake checked his star charts. Haven's Rest was 3 days away at best speed. "Can you meet us there?" "You're really doing this?" "Yeah, I am." Susan smiled slightly. "Then I'll be there. But Jake, be careful. The collective doesn't like losing property, and they have security forces that aren't afraid to use them." After ending the call, Jake returned to the cargo bay. Was awake, watching the entrance with alert eyes. Still slept peacefully. "I'm taking you to Haven's Rest," Jake said. "It's a safe station, or as safe as we can get. I have a friend there who might be able to help." Stared at him. "You would risk this for us. You could turn us in, claim the reward, buy a better ship." "Yeah, I could, but I won't." "Why, we are nothing to you, strangers, aliens." Jake thought about how to explain it. "Where I come from on Earth, we have a long history of people being treated as property. It took wars and centuries of struggle to end it. A lot of people died fighting to make sure everyone could be free. I can't look at you and your daughter and pretend I don't see what's happening. I can't be one of the people who looked away." His eyes filled with tears. "I thought humans were dangerous. Everyone says humans are fierce, that they come from a death world and love violence. I was afraid when I saw you were human." "Humans can be dangerous," Jake admitted. "But being dangerous doesn't mean being evil. Sometimes the dangerous ones are the ones who fight for people who can't fight for themselves." "I do not know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to get off this station without being caught, and we have to stay ahead of the collective until we reach Haven's Rest." The next day, Jake worked frantically to get the Wandering Star ready for departure. He called in a favor from a mechanic he knew from previous jobs, took one look at the ship and whistled. "You bought this piece of junk. It's a good ship, just needs work." Grinned. "I'll get the engines running properly, but you owe me a beer when you get back." "Deal." While worked on the engines, Jake filed his departure plans with station control. He claimed he was heading to the frontier mining colonies to start trading operations. Nothing unusual, nothing that would attract attention. But when he returned to his ship that evening, a man was waiting near the docking bay entrance. The man was human, well-dressed, with a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jake, my name is Gregory. I work for the collective. I wonder if I could ask you a few questions." Jake kept his face neutral, but his heart raced. "Questions about what?" Gregory pulled out a small data pad and displayed two images, and their faces clear and recognizable. "We're looking for two workers who went missing several weeks ago. They may have stowed away on vessels docked at this station. Have you seen them?" "No," Jake said. It wasn't quite a lie. He hadn't seen them until after he bought his ship, which was technically not at this station but in storage. "Are you sure? We have reason to believe they may be hiding on recently purchased vessels. Your ship, the Wandering Star, was decommissioned around the same time these workers disappeared." Jake shrugged. "I just bought that ship 3 days ago, been doing repairs ever since. Haven't seen anyone except my mechanic." Studied him carefully. "You understand that harboring escaped workers is a serious offense. The collective has legal authority to recover its contracted employees. Anyone interfering with that recovery could face criminal charges." "I understand, but like I said, I haven't seen anyone." "Would you mind if I searched your vessel?" Jake felt anger rising but pushed it down. "Actually, I would mind. You're not station security. You have no authority to search private property without a warrant." Smile grew colder. "I can get a warrant if necessary." "Then get one. Until you do, stay off my ship." The two men stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, nodded. "Very well, but I'll be watching, Captain. If those workers surface, I'll know about it." Jake waited until left before entering his ship. He found in the engine room, putting the final touches on the power system. "How long until we can launch?" Jake asked. Wiped grease from his hands. "Another 6 hours, maybe. Why, you look nervous." "The collective is here. They're searching for stowaways." His expression grew serious. "You got someone hiding on board, don't you?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. "A mother and her kid. The collective branded them like cattle. I can't just turn them over." "Yeah, I heard about what the collective does to workers. It's wrong." Thought for a moment. "I can have you ready in 4 hours if I skip some safety checks." "Will we make it to Haven's Rest?" "Probably, assuming the engines don't explode." "Good enough, do it." While worked, Jake went to the cargo bay and found sitting with. The child was drawing pictures on a data pad Jake had given her, simple images of flowers and trees. "We have a problem," Jake said. "The collective is here. They're searching ships." Pulled close, "They found us." "Not yet, but they will soon. We need to leave faster than planned." "When?" "4 hours." Nodded, her face pale but determined. "We will be ready." Jake spent those 4 hours in frantic preparation. He loaded supplies, filed updated departure plans, and checked every system on the ship twice. Finished the engine work with an hour to spare. "She'll fly," said. "Just don't push her too hard until you can do a proper overhaul." "Thanks, I owe you more than a beer." "Just get those people to safety. That's payment enough." Jake was preparing to seal the ship when Gregory appeared at the docking bay entrance again. This time, he had two security officers with him, both wearing collective uniforms and carrying weapons. "Captain," called out, "I have a warrant to search your vessel." Jake stepped to the edge of his boarding ramp. "Let me see it." Held up a data pad showing an official-looking document. It had seals and signatures, looked legitimate. But Jake noticed something interesting. It was issued by the collective's own legal department, not by station authorities. "This isn't a station warrant," Jake said. "This is a corporate document. You have no authority here." "The collective has an agreement with Meridian Point Administration," said. "We have the right to recover our property." "Property?" Jake's voice rose. "You mean people. You think you can call people property?" Other dock workers had begun to notice the confrontation. A small crowd gathered, mostly humans who worked as mechanics, loaders, and ship crew. They watched with interest. Sense the shift in atmosphere. This is a private matter, please disperse. It's not private when you're standing in a public dock, one of the workers said. What's the collective doing here? Recovering stolen assets, said. Stolen assets, another worker laughed. You mean escaped slaves? The collective security officers looked uncomfortable. The crowd was growing larger, and the mood was turning hostile. Most frontier station workers were human, and they valued their independence. The collective represented exactly the kind of corporate control they had come out here to escape. Jake saw his chance. He activated his comm and called station security. This is Captain at Bay 14. I have unauthorized personnel trying to board my vessel under false pretenses. Station security arrived within minutes. The officer in charge, a grizzled human named Steve Porter, assessed the situation quickly. What's going on here? The collective is trying to search my ship without proper authority, Jake said. Held up his data pad. We have a warrant. Steve examined the document and shook his head. This is a corporate warrant. It has no legal standing on Meridian Point. If you want to search a vessel, you need authorization from station administration, not your own legal department. This is a matter of recovering contracted workers, insisted. Then file the proper paperwork with administration. Until you do, Captain is free to refuse any search. Steve looked at Jake. You have departure clearance. Filed an hour ago. Then you're free to launch whenever you're ready. His face reddened with anger. You're making a mistake, officer. The collective will remember this. The collective can file a complaint with administration, Steve said calmly. But right now, you need to step away from this vessel. The crowd of dock workers murmured approval. Several of them moved to stand between and Jake's ship, a silent show of solidarity. Realized he was beaten. This isn't over, Captain. The collective has ships throughout this sector. We will find you. Get in line, Jake said. He sealed the boarding ramp and headed to the cockpit. Had already departed, giving Jake a thumbs up through the window as he left. Jake powered up the engines, feeling the familiar vibration as they came to life. Meridian Point Control. This is Wandering Star requesting departure clearance. Wandering Star, you are cleared for departure. Safe travels, Captain. The ship lifted from the docking bay and moved into open space. Jake waited until they were clear of the station's traffic lanes before activating the faster-than-light drive. The stars stretched and blurred as the Wandering Star jumped to FTL speed. In the cargo bay, felt the shift and knew they had escaped. She held tight, not quite believing they had made it off the station. The human had kept his word. They were free, at least for now. Jake set the course for Haven's Rest and then went to check on his passengers. He found them sitting together, looking out a small viewport at the streaming stars. We made it, Jake said. 3 days to Haven's Rest, assuming nothing goes wrong. Thank you, said. I still cannot believe you did this for us. You might want to hold off on the thanks. Wasn't bluffing. The collective has ships out here and they'll be looking for us. Will we make it? I don't know, but I'm going to try. The first day of the journey passed quietly. Jake spent his time plotting the safest route and making minor repairs to the ship, and explored their new surroundings, careful to stay out of Jake's way. Warmed up to Jake faster than her mother. The child asked questions in broken galactic standard, wanting to know about humans and Earth. Jake told her stories about his home planet, about oceans and mountains and cities full of people. Is Earth beautiful? Asked. Parts of it are beautiful, parts of it are harsh and dangerous, but it's home. I want to see my home again, said quietly. Jake looked at who had tears in her eyes. Maybe someday you will. On the second day, the ship's sensors detected another vessel approaching. Jake checked the ID signature and felt his stomach drop. It was a collective patrol ship, faster and better armed than the Wandering Star. Unidentified vessel, This is Collective Patrol Ship Enforcer. Reduce speed and prepare to be boarded for inspection." Jake didn't respond. Instead, he pushed the engines to maximum speed and changed course. The patrol ship adjusted to follow. Jake appeared in the cockpit doorway, her face tight with fear. "They found us, hold on." The chase began. The Enforcer was faster, but Jake had more experience piloting through crowded space. He dove toward a nearby asteroid field, a dense cluster of rocks that most ships avoided. "Wandering Star, you are violating traffic protocols. Cease evasion immediately or we will open fire." Jake ignored the warning and plunged into the asteroid field. The rocks came at them fast, some as large as the ship itself. He dodged and weaved, using every trick he had learned in 15 years of hauling cargo through dangerous space. The Enforcer followed, but more cautiously. They had better weapons but couldn't use them effectively while dodging asteroids. The chase continued for 30 minutes, both ships taking minor damage from debris. Then Jake saw it, a massive asteroid, honeycombed with old mining tunnels. He pushed the ship toward it, finding a tunnel large enough to fit through. The Wandering Star scraped through the opening with meters to spare. The Enforcer tried to follow but was too large. The patrol ship broke off, unable to pursue further into the asteroid. Jake guided his ship through the tunnels, using old mining maps he had downloaded years ago. The Wandering Star emerged on the other side of the asteroid, battered but intact. "Collective vessel is no longer pursuing," the computer announced. Jake let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. They had escaped, but the ship had taken damage. He would need to make repairs before they reached Haven's Rest. "Is it over?" asked from the doorway. "For now, but they know we're heading this direction. They'll be waiting for us." "What do we do?" Jake looked at the navigation display, thinking hard. "We keep going. We don't have a choice now." Wandering Star limped into Haven's Rest Station 30 hours later. The chase through the asteroid field had damaged the port engine, cracked several hull plates and drained the backup power cells, but they had made it. Jake docked the ship and sent a message to Susan Grant. She arrived within the hour, accompanied by a tall human man with gray hair and steady eyes. "Jake, this is Martinez, the station administrator," Susan said. "This is my friend I told you about." Shook Jake's hand. "Susan says you're harboring refugees. That's going to cause problems with the collective." "I know, but I couldn't just hand them over." Studied Jake for a moment, then nodded. "Show me." Jake led them to the cargo bay and waited. When they saw Susan and moved protectively in front of her daughter. "It's okay," Jake said. "These are friends." Susan knelt down to level. "Hello, sweetheart, my name is Susan. I'm a lawyer. Do you know what that means?" Shook her head. "It means I help people when someone is being unfair to them. I'd like to help you and your mother if you'll let me." Examined the brands on his arm. His face grew hard. "I've seen reports about these, but seeing them in person is different. This is slavery, plain and simple." "Can you help them?" Jake asked. "I can give them sanctuary on this station," said. "Haven's Rest is independent. We're not under collective jurisdiction, but the collective will send people to demand their return. They'll claim legal authority under their contracts with the government." Susan pulled out her data pad. "I've been researching those contracts. They violate at least 3 labor treaties. The problem is proving it in court. The collective has buried the evidence under layers of legal documents." "What if we had witnesses?" said quietly. "There are thousands of workers in collective facilities. Many would testify if they were safe." "That's the catch," Susan said. "They're not safe. The collective controls their movements, monitors their communications. Getting testimonies would be nearly impossible." "Unless we make this public," Jake said. "Really public, make it so big that the collective can't hide anymore." Susan looked thoughtful. "I know a journalist, Lisa Park. She works for Independent Galactic News. She's been trying to investigate the collective's practices but hasn't had solid evidence. Would she come here? Jake asked. If I told her we have escaped workers willing to talk, she'd come immediately. Made a decision. Do it. Bring her here. But understand, once this becomes public, the collective will come at us hard. They'll threaten sanctions, maybe even violence. This station can handle it, Jake asked. Smiled grimly. This station is home to 300 humans who came out here specifically to get away from corporate control. If the collective wants trouble, we'll give them plenty. Lisa Park arrived 2 days later. She was a sharp-eyed human woman with a recorder built into her glasses and a reputation for exposing corruption. When she met, her professional demeanor cracked. They branded a child, she said, her voice shaking. They actually branded a child. They brand all of us, said. Even the bobbies born in collective facilities. They say it is for identification, but we know what it really means. Lisa spent hours interviewing, recording her testimony, taking images of the brands. She contacted her network, which began preparing a documentary. Meanwhile, word spread through Haven's Rest about the refugee mother and child being protected by humans. The reaction surprised even Jake. Human traders who had never met him began offering supplies. Mechanics volunteered to repair the wandering star for free. Even the local security team, led by a tough former military officer named, positioned themselves to defend against any collective attempt to seize and. Why are they doing this? Asked Jake as they watched a line of humans bringing food and supplies to the ship. We are nothing to them. Why do they care? Jake thought about how to explain. Humans have a thing about bullies. We don't like seeing the strong prey on the weak, and we really don't like seeing kids hurt. That brand on its arm, that makes every human on this station see red. A human woman approached with a box of children's clothes. Thought your little one might need these, she said too. My daughter outgrew them. Took the box with trembling hands. Thank you, I don't know what to say. Don't need to say anything, just keep that baby safe. 3 days after Lisa's arrival, the collective made their move. A delegation arrived on Haven's Rest, led by Gregory and accompanied by 4 collective security officers. They demanded a meeting with Martinez. Met them in the station's administration office. Jake, Susan, and stood with him. Lisa Park's cameras recorded everything. Administrator Martinez said, the collective formally requests the return of 2 contracted workers who are illegally present on the station. Request said. Face hardened. You don't have the authority to harbor escaped workers. The collective has legal contracts that must be honored. Those contracts are under legal review, Susan said. Until we determine whether they violate labor laws, my clients will remain under protective custody. Your clients are property of the collective. They're people, Jake said, not property. Turned to Jake. Captain, you have committed multiple criminal acts, harboring escaped workers, evading lawful pursuit, interfering with collective operations. You're looking at serious charges. Charge me then. I'll take my chances in court. The collective is offering a reasonable compromise, said, addressing again. Return the workers and we'll overlook Captain's actions. We'll even compensate the station for any inconvenience. How much? He asked. Named a figure. It was substantial, enough to fund station operations for months. Didn't hesitate, not interested. You're making a serious mistake. The collective has significant economic power. We can make things very difficult for independent stations that don't cooperate. Is that a threat? Asked, stepping forward. It's a statement of fact. The collective controls shipping lanes, trade agreements, resource allocations. Stations that oppose us tend to find themselves isolated. Leaned back in his chair. Let me tell you something about humans, mister. We're stubborn, we're contrary, and we really don't like being threatened. You want to isolate this station. Go ahead. But you'll find that other human traders will come here just to spite you. They'll bring their business, their credits, and their support, because humans stick together when someone tries to push us around. You're being unreasonable. No, I'm being human. Now get off my station. Stood, you haven't heard the last of this. I'm sure we haven't. Lisa Park's documentary aired across the galactic networks that evening. It showed everything. The brands, the testimonies, the collective's threats. The images of Small Arm with its burned marking spread across 1 billion screens. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Citizens on there began protesting in the streets, demanding their government end the agreements with the collective. Other species with workers in collective facilities started asking questions. Human governments issued statements condemning the practice of branding workers. The collective tried to control the narrative, claiming the documentary was biased, that their contracts were legal, that was lying. But the images didn't lie. Everyone could see the brands, hear testimony, watch threatening Haven's rest. Human social networks exploded with anger. Hashtags demanding justice for and trended across dozens of systems. Human traders began boycotting collective facilities. Some even organized convoys to Haven's Rest, bringing supplies and support. The collective's response was predictable. 5 days after the documentary aired, a collective security fleet arrived at Haven's Rest. 12 ships, heavily armed, arranged in a blockade formation around the station. The fleet commander issued an ultimatum. Return the escaped workers within 12 hours or face consequences. Called an emergency meeting with station security and the human ship captains present at Haven's Rest. Jake attended, along with Susan and Lisa. We have 40 ships currently docked, said. Most are cargo vessels, not combat ships. Against 12 collective security vessels, we'd get massacred if it came to fighting. Then we need more ships, Jake said. From where? Even if we called for help, no one could get here in 12 hours. SCOM unit beeped. He answered and his eyes widened. Say that again. A voice came through. This is Captain Hayes of the independent trader Horizon Runner. We're 30 minutes out with 15 other ships. We heard Haven's Rest needed support. Another voice joined in. Captain Gary Foster of the Swift Current. 20 ships following our position, ETA 45 minutes. Then another, Captain Karen White of the Freedom's Voice. We're bringing 32 vessels. Stared at the comm unit in disbelief. How many ships are coming? Last count over 100, said. Every independent human trader in the sector who could break away. We heard you were protecting that woman and her kid. Figured you might need backup. Jake felt something tighten in his chest. Humans from across the sector, most of whom had never met or were coming to help. Not for profit, not for glory. Just because it was the right thing to do. There's more, continued. 3 Earth Alliance patrol vessels were doing exercises nearby. They heard what was happening and requested permission to observe the situation. They're not officially taking sides, but they're here. Looked at the others in the room. Looks like we've got support. Through the station windows, ships began arriving. Human vessels of every size and type, from small courier craft to massive cargo haulers. They positioned themselves around Haven's Rest, forming a protective barrier between the station and the collective fleet. The collective fleet commander watched his tactical display with growing concern as the human ships kept arriving. What had been a simple intimidation mission had turned into a potential incident. The standoff lasted 3 tense hours. The collective security fleet faced over 100 human vessels, with 3 Earth Alliance patrol ships positioned to observe. The situation balanced on the edge of violence. Commander of the collective fleet was no fool. He had served in enough conflicts to recognize when the odds had shifted against him. His mission was to recover 2 escaped workers, not start a war. He opened a channel to Martinez. Administrator, this situation has escalated beyond its original scope. I propose a dialogue. Flanked by Susan Grant and several human ship captains, responded, "What kind of dialogue?" The collective wants only to recover its contracted workers. Surely, we can resolve this without confrontation. Those workers are people seeking asylum from slavery, said. We won't hand them over. They are bound by legal contracts. Susan cut in. Contracts signed under duress with terms that violate multiple labor treaties. Contracts that include branding people like cattle. That's not legal employment, Commander. That's slavery with paperwork. Hesitated. His orders were clear, but orders didn't account for 100 human ships willing to fight. What do you propose? A formal hearing at the Galactic Council's neutral court, Susan said. Let an independent authority examine the collective's contracts and practices. If the court rules the contracts are legal and will submit to collective authority. If the court rules against the collective, all workers must be freed and compensated. The collective will never agree to that. Then I guess we're at an impasse, said, because those people aren't leaving this station unless it's to a neutral court. Looked at his tactical display. The human ships showed no signs of backing down. More were still arriving. This was no longer about two refugees. This had become a test of will between humanity and corporate power. He made a decision that likely saved lives. I will relay your proposal to collective leadership, but I make no promises. Fair enough, said. The collective fleet maintained position while urgent communications flew back and forth between and his superiors. Hours passed. The human ships didn't move, didn't waver. Inside the wandering star, Jake sat with and explaining what was happening. All those ships out there, said, watching through the viewport. All those humans, they came for us. They came because it's right, Jake said. Because they saw what the collective was doing and decided someone had to stand against it. I never imagined humans would be like this. We were taught you were violent, dangerous. I was terrified when I saw you were human. We can be dangerous, Jake admitted. But dangerous doesn't mean cruel. Sometimes the most dangerous thing is refusing to back down when you know you're right. Looked up at her mother. Are we safe now? Stroked her daughter's hair. I don't know, little one, but we have friends now, strong friends. On the broadcast from Haven's Rest had sparked something unprecedented. Millions of citizens took to the streets, demanding their government take action. They had seen the brands, herds, testimony, watched human ships gather to protect a refugee mother and child. The government, which had grown wealthy and comfortable through its agreements with the collective, suddenly faced a population that would no longer accept those agreements. Protests spread across the planet. Workers in collective facilities began refusing to work, staging coordinated strikes despite the risks. Other species watched with growing interest. They had workers in collective facilities. So did the and the. If the contracts were found illegal, what about theirs? Representatives from a dozen species began contacting the Galactic Council, requesting investigations into collective labor practices. The pressure on the collective mounted from all sides. Human traders began boycotting their facilities. Multiple governments threatened to revoke trade privileges. The strikes were disrupting production schedules. And at Haven's Rest, over 100 human ships sat in defiant formation, making it clear they would not allow the refugees to be taken by force. 3 days after the standoff began, the collective leadership issued a statement. They agreed to the neutral court hearing, on the condition that all parties honor the court's decision. The Galactic Council scheduled emergency sessions to examine the case. The standoff at Haven's Rest dissolved, but the human ships didn't leave. The captains made it clear they would stay until and were safely under court protection. The collective fleet, but their commander issued a warning too. You have made powerful enemies, Administrator. I'll take my chances, replied. Susan Grant assembled a legal team, drawing on human lawyers who volunteered their time. They worked around the clock, building a case that would expose every aspect of the collective's practices. Meanwhile, Lisa Park continued her reporting, giving the galaxy daily updates on the refugees who had sparked in crisis. The trial began 6 weeks after Jake had first discovered and in his cargo bay. It took place at the Galactic Council's neutral station, with representatives from dozens of species attending. The collective brought an army of lawyers. Susan's team was smaller but determined. The trial lasted 3 months. Witnesses about conditions in collective facilities. Documents were examined, contracts analyzed, treaties compared. The collective argued that their practices were legal, that workers had signed contracts voluntarily, that they were protected under existing agreements. Susan's team systematically destroyed those arguments. They showed how the collective used debt traps to keep workers indefinitely. They demonstrated that contracts were signed under false pretenses, with workers told they would be free after 5 years when the fine print ensured they never would be. They presented evidence of families deliberately separated, children raised in training facilities, workers branded like property. The brands became the central symbol of the case. No matter how many legal arguments the collective made, they couldn't explain away the practice of burning symbols into people's skin. The images of small branded arms circulated throughout the galaxy, generating outrage across species lines. The collective tried to claim the brands were voluntary identification, but when Susan put witnesses on the stand who described being held down while the brands were burned into their flesh, that argument collapsed. When she presented testimony from a former collective official who admitted the brands were designed to prevent workers from hiding if they escaped, even the judges looked disturbed. The Galactic Court's ruling came on a morning when Jake sat within the courtroom gallery, was playing in a supervised area nearby, drawing pictures of flowers. The head judge, a neutral arbiter from a species known for fair rulings, read the decision. This court finds that the labor contracts between the collective and workers contain multiple violations of labor law. The practices of debt manipulation, family separation, and physical branding constitute forms of involuntary servitude that are prohibited under galactic treaties. Grab Jake's hand, squeezing it tight. The court orders the immediate release of all workers from collective facilities. The collective is required to provide transportation to workers' home systems and to pay compensation for time worked beyond original contract terms. The practice of branding workers is declared illegal and must cease immediately across all collective operations. The courtroom erupted in noise, burst into tears, and Jake held her while she sobbed with relief. Around them, humans who had traveled to attend the trial cheered. The collective legal team sat in stunned silence. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court recommends a comprehensive review of all labor contracts held by the collective with other species. The Galactic Council is directed to establish new labor protection standards to prevent similar abuses in the future. It was more than a victory. It was a complete restructuring of how labor was handled across multiple systems. Later that day, Jake stood on the observation deck of the neutral station, watching ships come and go. Found him there withholding her hand. "The collective is already releasing workers," said. "Transport ships are heading to their facilities now. Thousands of will go home." "That's good," Jake said. "It is more than good. It is a miracle, and it happened because you refused to look away when you found us in your cargo bay." Jake shook his head. "I just did what anyone should do." "But not everyone would have. You risked everything for strangers. For aliens you had no reason to help." Tugged on Jake's sleeve. "Will you come visit us on our—" Jake knelt down to her level. "I'd like that." "Good, I want to show you our gardens. They are very beautiful, and I want you to meet my grandmother. She will want to thank you." Smiled. "Actually, I have a different proposal. Jake, the wandering star is repaired now. You were planning to start trading operations. Yeah, been putting it off until this trial ended. What if you had a partner? Someone who knows the markets, who can help you build relationships with my people. They owe humanity a great debt. Many will want to trade with human merchants they can trust. Jake stood up, considering, you want to be my business partner. If you will have us, and I have no home to return to. My family believed I was dead years ago. Starting fresh somewhere seems better than trying to reclaim a past that no longer exists. What about Susan's offer? Susan had offered to hire to help with ongoing labor rights cases. I can do both. Travel with you, help you build your trading business, and assist Susan when cases require testimony or expertise. Jake thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. Okay, partners. Cheered and hugged Jake's leg. Eyes showed that rare expression of deep joy. 3 days later, the wandering star departed the neutral station with its crew of 3. Jake plotted a course to the frontier trading posts, places where someone with the right connections could build a profitable business. Contacted communities, introducing the human who had saved her and her daughter. The response was overwhelming. Merchants offered trade agreements, favorable terms, access to markets that had been closed to most human traders. They wanted to work with the human who had started the chain of events that freed their people. Word spread to other species too. All species that had been under exploitative contracts heard the story of the human trader who chose justice over profit. Many wanted to meet him, to establish relationships with someone they knew they could trust. Within 6 months, the wandering star was operating at full capacity, hauling goods between systems, negotiating fair trades, and building a reputation for honest dealing. Proved invaluable, her knowledge of multiple species, customs, and markets making difficult negotiations smooth. Thrived. The frightened branded child transformed into a curious, happy girl who learned to navigate by the stars and helped Jake with ship maintenance. Her brand remained, a scar that would never fully fade, but she wore it now not as a mark of ownership but as a reminder of survival. A year after the trial, Jake received a message from Martinez. Haven's Rest was hosting a ceremony to honor those who had stood against the collective. Would Jake attend? He brought into the station, where they found dozens of the human ships that had come to Haven's Rest during the standoff. The ceremony was simple but moving. Gave a speech about standing up for what was right. Presented Jake with a medal that he immediately tried to refuse. You started something important, said. You reminded us that having power means using it to protect those who can't protect themselves. That evening, Jake sat in his ship with his crew, watching the stars through the viewport. Had fallen asleep with her head on his lap. The woman looked at Jake with an expression of deep contentment. Do you ever regret it? Asked quietly. You could have claimed the reward, bought a better ship, avoided all this trouble. Jake thought about the year that had passed. The danger, the stress, the uncertainty. But he also thought about the thousands of workers who were now free. The changes in labor law that would protect countless beings in the future, the partnership he had built with, and the joy of watching transform from a terrified child into a confident young person. No, he said, I don't regret it. Why did you do it, really? Jake was quiet for a moment, searching for the right words. My grandfather used to tell me that the measure of a person isn't what they do when everyone is watching. It's what they do when they think no one will ever know. When I found you in that cargo bay, I had a choice. Do the easy thing or do the right thing. I chose right, and that choice led to this. He gestured at the peaceful scene, at the sleeping, at the ship that was now their home. This is worth more than any reward money could buy. Reached across and squeezed his hand. The galaxy is better because you made that choice. Maybe, or maybe I just got lucky that one decision led to so many good people stepping up to help. That is humanity's strength, said. One person stands up and others follow. That is what my people will remember, not that humans are dangerous or violent, but that when they see injustice they act, and when one acts others will join them. The wandering star continued its journey through the stars, carrying a crew bound not by contracts or obligations, but by friendship and shared purpose. Behind them, the changes they had sparked continued to ripple through the galaxy. The collective never recovered its former power. Other species began demanding fair labor practices. New laws were passed, new protections established, and at the center of it all was the story of one human trader who looked at a terrified mother and child and chose to help. That story spread far and wide, told in 1,000 languages across 1,000 worlds. It became a reminder of what humans were capable of when they chose compassion over convenience, justice over profit, and courage over fear. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, Jake piloted his ship toward the next destination, surrounded by the family he had chosen and the future they were building together.